Moza Racing made the explosive announcement that they are bringing a force feedback joystick to the world of flight simulation. So in this video, as someone that has a force feedback joystick already, one that cost a huge sum of money, I'm not proud how much I spent on it, and as someone that's a massive haptics and force feedback fan and nerd, we're going to be talking about this new force feedback joystick, taking a look at what it looks like it will deliver, and also give my perspective on why this is such a huge thing for the world of flight simulation and also the world of force feedback. Thank you to everybody that likes, subscribes and has enough mental faculty impairment to be a channel member supporting us financially. Really do appreciate it, and you guys allow this ridiculous hyper niche content to take place. Also, if you do intend on buying Moza equipment, we have a Moza affiliate link in the description, so you can use that and that will support us as well. So don't do any of those things and the world will be a better place. But nonetheless, really appreciate it. Thank you very much. On with the video. So, as I say, at Flight Sim Expo, Moza dropped the bombshell of announcing this force feedback joystick here, which we've got some interesting points to talk about, as well as a Moza HOTAS and Moza rudder pedals. Now, the HOTAS and rudder look absolutely stunning, absolutely fantastic. It's going to be really interesting to see if the HOTAS compares with the HOTAS Warthog, which I currently use, which I think is one of the leading HOTAS options on the market, especially when you're talking for value for money. The rudder pedals as well, they look super nice and science fiction-y and futuristic. They look as if they just use a spring-based system to offer a resistance there and a sort of centering resistance. No force feedback as far as I'm aware on the pedals. But then the joystick is really the most exciting part of this. And there are some interesting things to note about this. So the way that this is configured is you have the physical joystick that you hold onto on top with the buttons. This then connects to the motor unit via an adapter which uses the Thrustmaster connection. I believe it does. And then that means you can use stuff like the Verpil joysticks, Thrustmaster joysticks, or Moza's joysticks on this. I would assume that they'll all be cross-compatible. That's kind of how things have gone in the flight sim space. The Thrustmaster connection, for some reason, has become the default. We'll have to wait for more information on that. The key thing though, and the most exciting part, is the base here, which looks very similar to the Brunner CSL base. It's a very similar arrangement and configuration to the Brunner CSL. I wonder if Moza have either licensed things from Brunner or if they have been inspired by Brunner. But either way, it's not necessarily a bad thing, because I have the Brunner CSL on my rig and that's what I do my flight simming with, and it's an absolutely fantastic force feedback base where you have two motors in here. The Brunner and this, you've got two motors. One is obviously for Y, one's for X, and that delivers the force to the joystick to move it in all the different directions. The thing will be, I think, the most interesting part will be the actual strength of the motors and how strong those motors are whilst under load, because with these types of devices, unlike direct drive wheels, which are really huge motors, the motors used in these joysticks are a lot smaller, so they're a lot more prone to overheating. They're similar size motors to what you'd get in the older belt-driven wheels, like the Fanatec CSL wheels or the CSL Elite, or they're sort of the kind of thing that you'd get in 3D printers, maybe a bit more chunky than those, like a larger 3D printer. They are a bit prone to overheating, so that all has to be managed. But it'll be really interesting to see what the actual specs of those motors are, the holding torque, and then also, crucially, the smoothness of those motors. When it comes to force feedback joysticks, because of the how directly you're connected to those motors and the gubbins inside of them, and the fact that it's also got two motors and how they all interact, it's very hard to get that to be super duper smooth, and you really notice that notchiness with a force feedback joystick compared to when you're playing with a force feedback wheel where you've got a larger wheel rim that actually masks various aspects of the magnetic cogging or belts and what have you. So it'll be really interesting to actually get a hands-on with this motor. Now, the other big aspect with this, which I'm really interested in, is the software side of it. So if you use a force feedback joystick at the moment, like the Brunner CSL, which I'm using now, most of the force feedback with many of the games is done through taking telemetry out of the game, and then the software of the force feedback joystick takes that telemetry and converts that into force feedback on the joystick. So when you go faster, the joystick might give more resistance. When there's turbulence in the simulator, that will move the joystick. And then you have things like effects like rotor speed, or if the wheels are on the ground, that can then play canned effects that are more sort of immersive effects, but can actually work quite well to tell you what's going on with the aircraft. There is, with some simulators, the original Microsoft force feedback drivers that go all the way back to when we had like the Microsoft Sidewinder, which is actually a fantastic joystick. I had a chance to use one recently, and I used one, oh guys, hundreds of years ago now. I used to use one back in the day with various games. Those Microsoft drivers are still in some games, and you can use those in some cases, but it will depend how Moza decide to interact with that. With the Brunner, you have to do some weird stuff with Arduinos and things to access that. It all gets a bit crazy and convoluted. Anyway, the point is, what really matters is the software side of the Moza joystick and how seamless they can make that, and how they can then make it work with the different flight sims out of the box. If this can work with Microsoft Flight Sim 24, DCS, well, that's it really. Microsoft Flight Sim and DCS, maybe with some of the glider simulators, but those are the two main ones. If it can just work out of the box with those seamlessly, with really good rich detail, that would be absolutely superb. Now, the key thing, another super key thing and important thing with this, is price. Obviously, the force feedback joysticks that exist at the moment on the market are ridiculously expensive because they're typically sold to pilot training centers. The yokes and joysticks are not really mass market consumer devices, and this is one of the reasons why force feedback has kind of fallen to the wayside outside of high-end professional simulation. And as a result, it's not been a priority for DCS or Microsoft Flight Sim to really have fully fledged force feedback in their games, or just many other games, to be honest. The underlying force feedback support is pretty poor. Even in driving simulators, the underlying force feedback stuff is really quite dated and could be a lot better. So the big hope with this is that Moza can sell this joystick for a competitive price. And the Brunner CSL, I think all in, I spent about £1,200 on it. This is quite a few years back now. And that's obviously a stupid amount of money for a joystick. If this can be like $499 and it comes with the stick, or if they can do a bundle for $499 with the HOTAS as well, that's still a lot of money for a lot of people. But for flight sim enthusiasts, that's an absolute bargain. And there is a potential that this could even be sold for cheaper. Like, you could do this for sort of $299. The components and the nature of it could be cheaper. Moza are just going to be in a position to decide how much profit they want to make out of this, or how much they've mass produced it. But if this can be sold for as cheap as possible, I think in the long term that actually ends up being beneficial for Moza, because the more that people see this force feedback joystick, the more affordable it is, the more software will want to support it, and the more people will experience force feedback joysticks and haptics and be like, oh my god, this is absolutely incredible, and how have we had 20 years with no really decent force feedback other than in driving simulators? For me, as a mental force feedback and haptics fan, I've got a Novint Falcon. I have every force feedback device. It's like I collect them. As a fan of this stuff, it's been like sort of drilling through my forehead the fact that haptics and force feedback has just been forgotten about. So if this can really reinvigorate people's knowledge of haptics and force feedback, oh my god, we are in for an absolute treat. Well, I am. I am, and the three people that are obsessed with force feedback. This could be an absolute game changer. So I really hope Moza do it for a good price, and I really hope they can nail the underlying software. But even outside of that, right, one of the things, another additional thing with force feedback joysticks is absolutely incredible. When you don't use the force feedback on them, they normally are way smoother if you just have a centering spring on it, so it just goes back to the center or doesn't, or stops at a certain point. Even those passive force feedback effects, which are totally independent of the simulator or anything else, those really massively positively impact the precision you have when playing games with a joystick, or if you're doing something like flying a helicopter, just having a joystick that's nice and loose and super smooth transforms things from any of the mechanical joysticks where they have a set spring on them, or you have to take them apart to then replace the spring. The force feedback joystick, the Brunner that I've been using, it completely transforms all the games for just the basic utility and precision of input. Yeah, if you like helicopters, of course I do. Again, just even without the proper force feedback for a helicopter, it still absolutely transforms helicopters in DCS and flight sim and what have you. So yeah, this is absolutely huge. Now, in terms of specifications, things are really sparse, and as I say, I really hope we can get one of these to actually test and review properly. All we have in terms of the motor spec is it's saying 9N. Now, I don't know if that's 9 Newton meters, and I don't know where they would be measuring the Newton meters from, if it's from the motor or the joystick, and you don't know what the, as I say, the holding force, and then also the smoothness. There's so many factors that go into what makes a force feedback joystick really good versus average or bad. So, if it's 9 Newton meters, that, from just a force perspective, is really good, but then the ranges are really important. So there's no real details yet. We'll just have to hopefully get one to review at some point, so we can actually really test it and compare it against the Brunner. But yeah, really, this is a proper hype moment. I will keep you guys posted as we find out more and get more details. But force feedback could be making its way back into the mainstream, which is the main thing. Bloody hell, how long has it taken from the Sidewinder, which came out in 2002, I believe? Oh dear. No, the Sidewinder came out in the 90s. The Sidewinder 2 came out in the 2000s. Then Saytech did a force feedback joystick. But it'd be so good if this takes off and force feedback becomes mainstream again. Keep our fingers crossed, but let me know if you guys are excited in the comments section, what you'd like to know more about it. But yeah, there you go. Moza, force feedback joystick. Bloody good. Fantastic job, Moza. At least someone's pushing things forwards. Till the next one, guys. Thank you for everyone that's clicked the like button. Thanks to everyone that's subscribed. Take care, and goodbye.